So I had a realization this morning, and I know this is going to sound just incredibly dry.
Oh.
I realized that nutriments are not the same thing as a sequence. And look, I can feel you rolling your eyes. It sounds like we're about to talk about, I don't know, vitamins or a math problem.
It does have a very academic ring to it. I'll give you that.
But just stick with me, because this isn't about diet, and it's not really about math. It's about a thought that kind of broke my brain. We're looking at a source text. It's called The Structural Engine of Sustenance.
Right.
And basically argues that we're all making this quiet category error in how we see our lives, and especially how we see our problems.
It's a huge structural correction, is what it is. The author's point is that we're constantly confusing a timeline with a support system, and because of that, we end up trying to solve our problems with totally the wrong set of tools.
And the text. It boils it down to the difference between a sequence question and a structural question.
Mm-hmm.
So, before we get totally lost in the weeds here, what's the mission for this deep dive? What's the fundamental shift we're talking about?
The mission is, I think, to stop looking at the clock and start looking at the engine. You know, most of us, we operate on that sequence question model. We ask, what comes first? What happens second? What's next? We see our lives, our progress, even our suffering as a story, just a line moving from left to right.
Which, that feels completely natural, right? I was born, then I grew up, then I got stressed, now I want to get unstressed.
Yeah.
It's a sequence.
It is a sequence. But the source argues that if you want to understand what sustains a problem, why you are actually fundamentally stuck, you have to ask a structural question.
Which is?
Not how did I get here, but what is feeding this right now? And that is the question of nutriment.
Okay, nutriment. Let's land on that word. The text uses the original term Ahara. And, you know, when I hear nutriment, my mind goes straight to food, physical food. But the text is using it in a much broader way. It's almost mechanical.
Yes, exactly. In this context, Ahara, or nutriment, it just means conditional support. It is pointedly not temporal order.
Okay, unpack that. Conditional support versus temporal order. That's the part that really tripped me up at first.
Well, think about the questions the text says to ask about nutriment. It asks, what does this feed on when it arises?
Okay.
And what keeps it going? Now, compare that to a sequence question, which is more like, what happened yesterday that made me feel this way?
Right, looking for a cause in the past.
Yeah, but a structural question looks for a condition in the present. The text puts it like this. Whenever this is present, it supports the presence of that.
I want to push on this a little bit because it can feel like we're just splitting hairs. I mean, doesn't the past cause a present? If I'm mad today, it's because of something that happened yesterday. So isn't the sequence the cause?
And that's the trap. That is the exact quiet category error the author is talking about. Yes, of course, history explains how you arrived at this moment. But history doesn't explain what is sustaining this moment.
Give me an analogy. My brain still wants to default back to the timeline.
Let's use the clock versus the engine. It's an idea that's kind of hinted at in the text. A clock is pure sequence. It's 12.00, then 12.01, then 12.02. You are stuck on that timeline.
Right, the passenger.
You can't skip ahead to 12.05. You can't just stay at 12.00. Now, think about an engine, like an internal combustion engine. The piston moves. Why?
It's fuel, spark, that sort of thing.
Right. It's not moving because the schedule says it's time to move. It moves because there's fuel and spark and compression all happening right now in a dependency loop.
So it's not a schedule, it's a condition.
Exactly. And if you cut the fuel line, the engine stops. It doesn't stop, 5 minutes later when the sequence is supposed to end.
No, it stops immediately.
Immediately, because the conditional support is gone. The text has this great line, no clock, no timeline, just conditional dependency.
No clock. No timeline. That is a really disorienting idea, because if I take that and I apply it to my own life, well, let's say I'm dealing with anxiety.
Okay.
The clock view says, okay, I'm in an anxious phase. I just have to ride this out until I get to the calm phase.
Which is what the text calls the waiting game.
Yes. I'm just waiting for 12.05. I'm waiting for the chapter to finish.
Yeah.
But the engine view, what does that say?
The engine view, the nutriment view, says your anxiety isn't a phase at all. It's a fire. And a fire only burns if you are throwing logs on it right now. So it asks, what are you feeding this anxiety?
Okay, honestly, that's kind of annoying.
Annoying. Why annoying?
Because it completely removes my excuse.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's a phase, I'm sort of a victim of time. I just have to wait it out.
Right.
But if it's a nutriment problem, then
Yeah.
I am actively participating in the maintenance of my own misery.
It's definitely less comforting in the short term, I'll grant you that. But it is so much more empowering. The text says that this linear thinking, the story trap, it just leads to passivity. You think, first this has to happen, then that will arise, and then finally something else will follow. You basically write a syllabus for your own freedom.
First, I have to heal my inner child. Then I have to find the right partner. Then I need to get that promotion. And then I'll be happy.
Precisely. And that's a sequence. And it's a trap. Because while you're waiting for all those dominoes to fall, you are totally ignoring the fuel lines running under the floorboards right now.
So let's talk about those fuel lines. The text brings up some heavy hitters. Ignorance, craving, feeling, intention. And normally, in a Dhamma context or even just regular psychology, we treat them like a chain reaction.
Like dominoes.
Right, dominoes. Ignorance hits craving, craving hits suffering. But this source is saying, don't look at the dominoes falling. Look at the table that's holding them all up.
That is a really good way to put it. The text uses a specific term, Yoniso Manasakara. Now, usually that's translated as something like wise attention.
Yeah, or appropriate attention.
But this author just reframes it completely. They say it's not about progression moving forward along the line.
Okay.
It's about reorientation.
Reorientation, like physically turning around to look at something else.
Exactly that. Imagine you're walking across a really long bridge. The sequence view is just focused on getting to the other side. You're thinking, how much longer? Are we there yet? Yoniso Manasakara, in this model, is stopping, leaning over the railing, and looking down at the pillars, holding the whole thing up. You're asking, what is supporting this bridge?
That feels incredibly hard to do when you're in the thick of it. If I'm in a panic attack, my only instinct is to find the exit, the sequence. When will this be over? It takes so much to stop and ask, what am I feeding right now?
Well, it's monumentally difficult. That's why the text calls it a structural correction. It runs completely counter to our narrative instinct. We are addicted to stories.
We want to know how the scene ends.
Yes. We don't want to pause the movie to analyze the lighting rig.
But the payoff. The text says the payoff is immediate.
It is. The text is very clear. You remove the support and the thing weakens immediately. There's no lag time.
Let's use a solid example. The text talks about upakalisa stains or defilements, things like greed, anger, stubbornness. Okay, so if I see my anger as a stain on a shirt, I think, okay, I need to wash this out. This is going to take time. I have to scrub and scrub and scrub.
That's the temporal view. The stain is a static thing that you have to remove over a period of time.
But this text says to see it as a fed pattern.
Yes. So think of the stain, not as dirt on a shirt, but as an image being projected onto a screen.
Oh, I like that. That's good.
You can stand there and scrub that screen all day long. You can wait for the movie to change. But the ugly image isn't on the screen. It's being fed by the projector. It's being sustained by a beam of light.
So the fed pattern approach is, don't scrub the screen. Unplug the projector.
Exactly. And if you cut the power, does the image sort of fade away over the next couple of weeks?
No, it's just gone. Instantly.
Yeah. That's the power of the structural view. It changes the whole game from cleaning up a big mess to starving a process.
But this is where I get stuck, and I think maybe you might feel this too. It sounds a little too simple, Just stop feeding it. Great advice, thanks. But how? We often feed these things without even knowing we're doing it.
And that's the crucial part. We don't know what the food is. We think the food is the external thing, the annoying comment, the traffic jam. But the text says the food is internal. It's the attention we give it. It's the craving for it to be different. It's the story we spin about it.
So just replaying the story in my head. I can't believe he said that. What a jerk. This always happens to me. That whole inner monologue. That's the fuel line.
That is the nutriment. That is the log you are actively throwing on the fire. You think you are processing the event. But from a structural perspective, you are just feeding the reaction.
Man, that hits home. We call it venting or processing, when really we might just be dining.
Dining on our own drama. I like it. And this brings us right to the heart of the text. There's one sentence in this whole thing that I think is worth the entire deep dive. It's the distinction between becoming and bondage.
Yes. I circled this one about 3 times.
Yeah.
The quote is, sequence explains becoming. Nutriment explains bondage.
It's a heavy sentence.
It feels like a riddle. Break that down for us. Sequence explains becoming.
Okay, so becoming is your life story. It's your biography. It's the sequence of events that made you the person you are today. I was born here. I had these parents. This trauma happened. That sequence explains why you have certain tendencies. It explains the shape of your life.
Got it. So if I'm in therapy talking about my childhood, I'm exploring the sequence of my becoming.
Exactly, which is very valuable. It gives you context. But, and this is the huge but, knowing the sequence doesn't automatically break the chain.
Right. I can know exactly why I have trust issues. My father left when I was a kid. Great. I know the sequence. I still have the trust issues today.
Precisely. You have explained the becoming, but you haven't solved the bondage.
Nutriment explains bondage.
Bondage is the mechanism holding you stuck right now. It asks, forgetting what your dad did 30 years ago, what are you doing today in this moment to keep that trust issue alive?
Ooh.
Are you feeding it with suspicion? By avoiding intimacy? By replaying that old story over and over again?
Wow. That is a massive distinction because we so often try to solve our bondage problems with becoming answers.
We do. We dig and dig into the past, hoping that if we just find the absolute beginning of the sequence, the whole thing will just unravel.
If I can just pinpoint the original trauma, my current anxiety will disappear.
But the text is saying that's a fallacy. The fire doesn't care who lit the match 10 years ago. It only cares about the wood you're throwing on it now.
That is. It's incredibly liberating, but it's also deeply frustrating because it means the solution is always right here, which means I have no one to blame but my own fuel delivery system.
It forces a total pivot. If you want to understand your story, you look at sequence. If you want freedom, you look at nutriment.
Freedom isn't a destination on a map. I wrote that down from the source.
It's not. If you look at it from the sequence model, freedom is always a place you arrive at later. One day I'll be healed. One day I'll finally get there.
But from a structural perspective.
Structurally, freedom is a dismantling. It's a withdrawal of support. Like the text says, nutriments explain how a phenomenon is sustained, not how it unfolds in time. If you stop sustaining it, the unfolding just stops.
It's the difference between trying to outrun a speeding train and just uncoupling the car you're in.
Or maybe realizing you're the one in the engine room shoveling coal into the furnace.
Right. Why is this train going so fast? I'm screaming. Well, just furiously shoveling coal.
And this brings us all the way back to the thought you had this morning. Nutriments are not the same as a sequence. It sounded so abstract at the beginning. But now
it feels like a skeleton key. It feels like we've been trying to pick a lock using a calendar, when what we actually needed to do was just stop feeding the lock mechanism.
it completely removes that hidden layer of I'll get there later thinking. It forces you to look at the immediate architecture of your own experience.
But I have to ask, does this mean we just ignore the future? Do we not make plans? If I stop looking at the sequence, don't I just become aimless?
That's a really good question. But the text isn't saying don't plan. It's saying don't confuse the plan with the sustenance. You can plan to build a house. That's a sequence. But gravity is holding you to the ground right now. That's a structure.
Okay.
You can plan for your retirement, but your actual happiness right here is being fed by your current mindset, not by your future bank account.
So we can live in the sequence, but we shouldn't look to the sequence for salvation.
Yes, that's it perfectly. Don't look to the timeline to solve a structural problem.
The source does drop a little teaser we should mention. We've been talking about nutriment as this big single concept, but it hints that there are actually 4 nutriments.
Oh, yeah, we haven't even gotten into those. Physical food, contact, intention, and consciousness. Those are the specific fuel types the Buddha identified.
That sounds like a whole other deep dive.
It really is. That's the advanced course in engineering. Today was just Intro to Structural Mechanics 101.
Fair enough. But I think this intro is enough to completely wreck everyone's week in the best possible way.
It definitely ruins your ability to wallow comfortably, that's for sure.
So let's wrap this up. A final thought for you to take away. We've used analogies of engines, fires, projectors. If you walk away with just one thing from the structural engine of sustenance, what should it be?
I think the takeaway is this. Stop asking, when will I get there? And start asking, what am I feeding right now?
Stop watching the clock.
Actually,
Check the fuel lines.
and I'll leave you with one last thought. We use that fire analogy. Most of us, we treat our problems, our anger, our sadness like a forest fire that we have to beat out with a blanket. We are fighting the event.
We're trying to solve the flames.
Exactly. But if the problem is a fed pattern, if it's a structural issue, then the fire isn't the event, it's the reaction. So what happens if you stop trying to put the fire out?
Stop fighting it.
What happens if you just stop throwing wood on it? You don't fight the flame, you don't argue with the heat, you just starve the structure that supports it.
And according to this text,
if the support is removed, the thing weakens immediately.
that is a scary and powerful experiment to try. Next time you're in it, don't fight the flames. Just look at your own hands and see if you're holding the wood.
Check your fuel lines.
Thanks for diving in with us on this one. I'm going to go stare at an engine for a while. See you on the next deep dive.